Welcome back to BAF Racing. We have another video recap from Soar Round 4 Amateur 600 race. Since we are sitting 5th in the Amateur 600 Championship, we will be starting this qualifying race in 5th position. That means we are starting from the second row in the middle for this race. For some context, the past couple rounds in this category has been pretty disappointing. Round 2 we finished 8th and round 3 we finished 10th. So for this weekend, I wanted to make a statement and let them know that we're still in the fight, and I wanted to finish strong going into the second half of the season. So on the grid, in the front row, we have Nash on the right, Melanie on the middle, both on board a CBR 600, Rupert on an R6. Beside me, we have Wyatt on an R6, and on my left, we have Nick on board a ZX6R. So here we go, start of the race, and off we go. So that wasn't a bad start. And to top it off, it looks like Jesse had a pretty poor launch. However, it looks like Nick had a stellar launch off the line. Now, going into turn 2, we're sitting in 4th position. We have Nash sitting at 1st, Melanie in 2nd, and Nick 3rd. So at this point, our goal is to just hang with the lead group and wait and see if there's any opportunities that'll open up for us to make a move. Right here, I noticed that we have a little more strength under braking when it comes to that corner in particular. So maybe that's something we'll be able to use later on in the race. In this round, we are running the long layout. It's more of a stop and go track with plenty of straights where horsepower becomes super important. Going onto the back straight, we see that Nash is already opening up a gap. His riding in the first half of the season has been unbeatable. So pretty much it's been a fight for second place for myself and about 4 or 5 other riders. Here we go, completing the first lap and on to the second lap of the race. And of course, Nick makes a move in turn 1 on Melanie. Coming up, I know that there's going to be a nice long straight, and it's a good opportunity for me to make a move at the end of that straight. So we'll try and close the gap here on Melanie on the exit of turn 3. The focus is a good drive onto the straight and hopefully open up an opportunity for a possible pass. So I held off the brakes just a fraction of a second and tried to take the inside line for a blocking pass. However, I kinda overcooked going into that corner and really suffered on the drive. Melanie nearly took that position back. Luckily, we were able to block the line and secure that pass. We are now sitting in 3rd position and I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's a good start for tomorrow's race. At this point of the race, Nick and Nash have really opened up a massive gap in the 1st and 2nd position. So now our strategy is to try and defend that position. Here we are on the halfway mark of the race, completing the 2nd lap and onto the 3rd lap. I knew that this section of the track, turn 2 and turn 3, were one of my weak points. And for the rest of Saturday's race, that's the area that I really focused on making an improvement. Fast forward to the end of the 3rd lap and onto the 4th lap. Melanie is still right on our tail and we are still sitting in 3rd position. And on to the final lap of the race. Nothing much has changed. Melanie is still on her tail and we are still sitting in 3rd position as we cross the final lap. And on to the last final corners of the qualifying race. Melanie is still right behind us, but fortunately we crossed the line qualifying 3rd in the Amateur 600 race. Moving on to the full race of the Amateur 600. Since we finished third in the qualifying, we will be starting in the front row. Pole position belongs to Nash and Nick starting in the middle of the front row, and myself starting on the far left. I actually prefer starting in third position since it's going to allow me to have a faster entry speed into turn 1 and inside line into turn 2. Heading into this race, I was feeling confident regarding turn 2 and 3. I believe I made some progress in terms of corner speed in that section. So here we go, getting ready for that race start. And off we go. I thought that was a really good launch. We were able to outdrive Nash right off the line and managed to take P1 going into turn 1. As we approach turn 3, I know that Nash is sitting right behind me, and once we hit that massive straightaway, his bike's horsepower will give him the edge, so I'm fully expecting him to make a pass. So that was a really easy pass by Nash. We're sitting in second place now, and Nick is right behind us, challenging me for the second position. At this point of the race, I don't know how close Nick is right behind me, but I can hear him. So my goal is to just try to stick to Nash as long as I can. I see here that Nick is really trying to make a pass on the inside line, but fortunately, we were able to hold our brakes there, going on to the back straight. Like I mentioned, I wanted to stick to Nash as long as I can, but he's starting to open up a bigger and bigger gap. And here we're completing the first lap and on to the second lap of the race. We're sitting in second place and we've been able to close the gap with Nash in the technical section. And of course we have Nick sitting on our tail in P3. So we have Nash still in sight, but I do notice that he's really strong in this section of the track. And I also noticed that he does have a much better corner exit. Not just in that corner, but in a few other corners as well. We're about halfway through the second lap and Nash is already inching away in the lead. Completing our second lap and onto our third lap of the race. We're still in P2 chasing Nash, and right behind us is Nick. And it looks like Nick has been able to reel me in the technical portion of the track. I still have Nash in sight, however, going into this corner, I kind of made a mistake going in a little too fast, allowing Nick to close the gap right behind me. At this point, Nash is slowly disappearing from my line of sight, so I'm now focusing on just trying to put down some fast lap time consistently. And completing the third lap and onto the fourth lap of the race, we're still sitting in P2 and Nick right on our tail. And an unfortunate event for Nick, it looked like he hit a patch and low-sided at the exit of turn 2. I did check up on him after the race and he was relatively okay. The bike was just a little bit banged up, a couple of parts, and he was back racing on the amateur superbike race. At this point, I had no idea that Nick had crashed out right behind me, and I'm still thinking that somebody's right behind me, so I continue to put down some fast lap time. Although I didn't realize it, but I had opened up a massive gap between myself and P3. Completing the 4th lap and onto the 5th lap of the race, we're still sitting in P2 with a massive gap between us and P3. At the same time, there's also a massive gap between us and P1. At this point, I was aware that Nick had crashed out, although I still was riding as hard as I can since I wasn't sure if there's anybody right behind me. Little did I know there was a massive gap between myself and P3. And it was at this point where it became a pretty lonely race, so we'll fast forward to the last few laps of the race. Here we go, completing the 9th and onto the final lap of the race. We're still sitting in P2. There's a massive gap between myself and Nash in P1. At the same time, there's also a massive gap between myself and P3. Approaching turn 4 at the end of the straight, I see a waving yellow flag, and it looks like it was Farouk Khan sitting just outside of the gravel. After speaking to a few of the riders, it looked like he had an incident with Sawyer in the last couple of laps in that corner. And like I mentioned, the second half of the race became a pretty lonely race. We never really had any real challenger for P2. And at this point, our gap out front is about 8 seconds, but our gap behind is about 19 seconds. Here we go, navigating the last few corners and finally finish the race in P2. So I was really happy with that result since it means that we've regained a lot of points, and more importantly, we made a statement that we're still in the fight for the top 3 in the championship.